I'm wondering when they're going to come out with the rabbit suit version of that. So Josh, if engineering were shoes, you'd be a pair of blue suede Elvis kicks tearing up the dance floor.
Welcome to Engineer versus Designer
Podcast.
For product designers, engineers, and anyone who's ever smelt atoms running sneakers and lived to tell the tale. My name is Josh, mechanical engineer of SolidSmack.com.
And my name is Adam, industrial designer of CADJunkie.com. Each week's show is broken into three halves. This week we'll stick our noses into the footwear design industry. First we'll serve up the top product design stories from this week's news, courtesy of SolidSmack.com.
Followed by design process tips, tricks, and Q&A compliments of CADJunkie.com.
And Josh, those Air Jordans you're wearing right now?
So comfy.
You can thank our special guest, Dwayne Edwards, for those. He's been a senior footwear designer at Nike, footwear design director at Brand Jordan, and is the founder of the Pensole Footwear Design Academy.
Dwayne, we're so glad you could join us today. If you were the real-life fruit ninja, but could only cut a single type of fruit for the rest of your life, what fruit would you mercilessly massacre?
Probably a pomegranate.
Oh, right.
Good choice, messy red goodness.
Yeah,
Thanks,
man,
Dwayne.
that would be interesting.
All right, sit tight. We'll be hearing more from you as the show goes on. Speaking of chopping it up, Josh Mings of SolidSmack.com butcher our ignorance with the samurai sword of knowledge. What have you got for us this week?
This week's SolidSmack update is brought to you by the Printastic family of Stratasys 3D printers. Dimension 3D printers are the ABS printing machines of your dreams, taking models direct from your CAD software. Check them out at Stratasys.com. If you've ever wanted to print your own playset, well, the time has come. Frankly, I'm surprised this is one of the first. MakerBot has made free downloadable 3D files for dollhouses, dolls, and accessories, Adam.
Yes!
You can download the MakerBot Fairy Tale Castle playset right now. Don't worry, boys. There's also a rocket playset, but I'm pretty sure a bunch of little girls just got really interested in 3D printing.
The Hong Kong Fashion Show kicked off with the 12th annual footwear design competition. There were some absolutely, insane designs. We had shoes shaped like boats and some slick wooden platforms with laser-cut leather overlays that Josh would look simply dazzling in my opinion.
Nice. Tech has taken another big leap with researchers at IBM demonstrating the first atomic scale magnetic memory, where they have successfully shown that a single bit of information can be stored in as few as 12 magnetic atoms, as opposed to currently available hard disk drives, which uses about 1 million atoms to store a single bit of information.
Holy cow. And CAD on the iOS and Android next summer. It will be possible, my friends.
Really?
Russian software developer Geometros will be launching the first native CAD engine for the devices.
Nice. Techsoft 3D, the company that creates the Hoops visualization technology used in many CAD programs, is making bank with revenue up 40%.
Apple has released, as you probably know by now, iBooks 2, and with that, the ability for authors and publishers to get their books out to the iPad masses. Granted, you price the book under $14.99 and give 30% of that sucker to Apple.
And if you love to see things made and the sound of work, check out the Alfred Dunhill traditional case-making video. Very freaking cool. Linked up on this episode at engineerversusdesigner.com. Now, our guest, Dwayne Edwards,
founder of Pensole Footwear Design Academy.
And if you're interested in footwear design,
I am.
You can register for PS2 Pensole Saturday School, an 11-week course giving you the knowledge to become that professional footwear designer you've always wanted to become. Details at pensole.com. So, Dwayne, anything you would like to add to that?
The PS2 class is obviously for local Oregon students because it meets on Saturday. But I also have a prep class coming up that's open for everyone. That's going to be the middle of March, I believe. And you can register for that one on mesh01.com. But it's basically for graduates where if you need that extra step to understand how to prepare for the job interview, how to prepare your portfolio, what they ask, the questions that they ask. So we'll have it'll be 3 weeks full of guest speakers, the proper way to put your portfolio together, the proper way to build your online program profile.
So many things. I mean, that's all stuff that is so badly needed. Kids just really have no idea how to do that stuff. It's amazing.
It's crazy. I mean, when in my old job, I would be amazed at the simple things that people would not do on a portfolio, like put their name or email address.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I've gotten a lot of that. One of the first things I tell my students when they come to class, I say, in your portfolios, when you submit a portfolio to me, you are to put your name and address at the top of every page. Why should I have to hunt for that? Josh, all of a sudden I feel like a ninja dojo master of knowledge just roundhouse kicked me in the face.
Yeah, that was me, dude. I just kicked you in the head. Well, more of the face area.
All right, I'm gonna go get some ice.
Adam O'Hearn of CatJunkie.com. Stop stretching in those incredibly short shorts for a few minutes and tell us what's on your mind this week, would ya?
This week's Cat Junkie Q&A is brought to you by Stratasys 3D printers, taking your 3D data from virtual to physical with ease. Designers, engineers, educators, and others are churning out amazingly detailed, durable prints with Stratasys Dimension printers. Make sure to go check those out at stratasys.com. So today we're talking with Dwayne Edwards, shoe design guru of Nike fame and founder of the Pensole Footwear Design Academy. In the third segment, Dwayne, we're going to be talking about your background, how you got started, your inspiration, and all that great stuff. But first, let's just talk shop a little bit here. You're a shoe designer, specifically a sports shoe designer, which is a really interesting design problem. You're using molded plastics, rubber, foam, sometimes even metal bits, as well as sewn fabrics, leather, and really all of these types of materials contribute to the structure and the comfort of the shoe, the function of the shoe. How does your design process start? Where do you get started? And then as you're doing that, how are you taking all of that complexity into account while you're designing?
You know what? It depends on the product that I'm working on. But I do apply the same process every time where, if I'm designing a high-end performance shoe for an NBA athlete compared to designing a horse riding boot, for someone who rides horses, my process is the same where I become the person I'm designing the shoe for. So I think that's important because similar to like if you're an actor or an actress, in order to really play that role, you have to become that role. So I kind of treat design in the same way where, if I really want to design the best product I feel I can for an athlete, I have to become that athlete. So I have to do the things that they do and understand what their needs are. So that'll be the first thing, which I found has been probably one of the most beneficial parts because it allows me to fully understand everything that I'm about to create. Then from there, within that process is, I'm an information junkie where I just like to find out everything there is to know about any type of inspiration that I select. And so one example of that is I worked on a shoe for Carmelo Anthony a few years back, and over the summer we talked about just, how he wanted to get better, things he wanted to improve upon for the next season. And one of the things he spoke about was the ability to be quicker and faster. So I had to go figure out, okay, how can I translate that into someone who's 6'8", 230 pounds? How am I going to make this person quicker and faster? So I ended up doing research, and I found that a jaguar, the cat, is the same dimensions just horizontally at 6'8", 230 pounds. So I went to the zoo, man. I went down to the Oregon Zoo and hung out with the guy who takes care of the cats. For a couple of hours and just asking questions. I'm pretty sure I'm the only guest he's ever had that hung out with him for a long period of time with a sketch pad. But no, I mean, for me though, it was important for me to understand, how does an object that large move so gracefully and so quickly? And then trying to figure out how can I translate that into product.
Just amazing. Do you sketch on paper a lot?
You know what? Not as much as I used to. What I do is actually I take notes. So I'll take a bunch of notes of what I want. So if you ever looked at one of my design files later on in my career, earlier in my career, I sketched a lot. But, as time went on, I would do very little sketching, but an awful lot of note taking. So what I would do is I'll basically compile the whole shoe in my head first. So I visually know what I want it to look like, and I use the notes just to remind me of those key features. So when it's time for me to actually lay the design down, all I have is my notes, and it'll take me 10 minutes to lay it down because I'm already seeing it in my head.
The mental work's already done. It's just execution from there.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so for me, and that's kind of how what I've kind of grown into is just that ability of using the brain to think more and visualization more. Sketching does that for you in real time, but for me, it's better for me to craft it in my head because I can see it in 3D. I can see the whole thing compared to just a flat dimensional object on paper.
Right.
And then that way, I'm building it over time.
Right,
so I could be somewhere without a sketch pad. And okay, that works. And it can go on this. So I'm always constant in my design process. I'm always constantly building it mentally and knowing what I want it to be.
That's really interesting. And so you're actually working primarily, and you're using your head as your design package. You're using your head as your primarily design tool. And then once you're done with that, you say you lay it down. Is that a 2D process? You jump into Illustrator? What do you do?
I'm old school, man. I use a regular piece of copy machine paper and a number 2 pencil. I lay it down first on that.
Nice.
Get it to where I want it to be after a couple tries, and then the computer part kicks in. But for me, I see everything in color, and I create everything in color. But I like to design in black and white, because in black and white it exposes all flaws. All flaws are exposed in black and white. You don't have shading and rendering and texture to hide behind, so the purity of the design is always going to be in black and white. So for me, it's once it looks great in black and white, then I add in those things that I know what I want it to look like. And that's what I found today, and a lot of the students and the kids coming up now is that they jump to that computer so quickly that it kind of erodes their skill of thinking, because they're thinking about the rendering, they're thinking about the color. Instead of thinking about how it works, how it works,
right?
And then what does it look like based off of the function that you want it to do? Where they jump to what they want it to look like instead of the function of what they want it to do, instead of what it should be. So for me, it's a different process than probably most. But I kind of equate it to playing sports a bit, where when you're younger, you have all this energy and you're running around the court and, doing all these things. And the older you get, the more you start to rely on your mental skills because the physical skills go away. So you become smarter.
Right.
So, I just kind of look at it as I become a smarter designer over time, where I don't waste a lot of energy, on things. So
from the 2D sketches, do you ever make physical models like in clay or cardboard foam or even 3D prints?
Yeah, dude. Well, I'll take it a step back. I'll get an existing shoe, get some painter's tape, some that natural painter's tape, tape the whole thing up.
Oh, nice.
Draw exactly what I want on that, paint it, and then I'll transfer it to 3D. So I need to see what it looks like first. And then I'll transfer it to 3D because I'm still working it out, because I want to work it out by hand first.
So you modify an existing shoe into what you want.
That's great. So what would you say is the most technically challenging part of this whole process?
It depends for different people. It depends on because all designers have weaknesses. I mean, everyone, designers, engineers, they have weaknesses. It just depends on which one it is. For me, I'm not the most gifted from a computer point of view, but I know exactly what I want it to be. So for me, that's why I like to do everything by hand first, because then it's much easier for me to lay it down on the computer. But I would really say just the amount of time it takes to get it back, because it's so crystal clear in my head of what I want, and then have to wait, a month or so to physically see it in real time. For me, at least, I would say the difficulty is being impatient.
Speaking of impatience, Josh, for crying out loud, would you stop chewing on that protractor? You're getting your teeth marks all over it.
I like it.
What did you do to my caliper? For God.
We'll be right back.
All right, and and welcome back. Today we're chatting with Dwayne Edwards, footwear designer of so many scintillating shoe styles and founder of Pensole Footwear Design Academy.
We wanted to have Dwayne on because the footwear industry is just such a completely different animal from most other product design industries.
So, Dwayne, you've accomplished so much. Winning your first footwear design contest at the age of 17. You must have been interested in shoe design at a very young age. Can you give us some background? What spurred this interest and what gave you the first big break in the industry?
Yeah, man. It's actually I drew my first shoe when I was about 11 that I can remember. But I was born with the gift. I was born with the gift to be able to draw anything I could see. And I would always draw different sports characters. And for some reason, the shoes always looked better than the rest of the body. So from there, man, I just kept drawing sneakers, and all through like middle school when I should have been doing, English and math, I was drawing sneakers in those classes, and my teacher would take my little 3x5 index cards and keep them. So once I got to high school, I started playing ball, and I wanted different shoes from everybody else. So I would do like Nike ID before Nike ID in the 80s, where I would go to the local shoe repair store and buy some paint, some shoe dye, and some duct tape. And I'll just tape up everything I wanted to not spray and spray them. So eventually that turned into a little side business in high school where I would customize people's shoes. But one day working at McDonald's, flipping burgers, and in the lobby at lunch break, I want to get another job. And looking at LA Times, I saw Reebok had a design competition, and I was like, man, I've always wanted to do it, so let me give it a shot, and end up winning it. The reward was a job. The difference though, I was 17, so they weren't expecting a 17-year-old to show up. So ultimately, they gave me a couple $100 and told me to come back and see them when I graduated from college. And that was actually the part of my problem was, I didn't know what school to go to because I wanted to be a footwear designer, and there were no schools that taught that. And so I go to my guidance counselor in high school. I was like, hey, I finally figured out what I want to do, and can you tell me what schools I should go to become a footwear designer? And she's like, there's no way, a black kid from Inglewood High School become a footwear designer. You're better off joining the military and just figuring out a way to get out of Inglewood alive, let alone, trying to be a designer. So that was good and bad. Good because she was now motivation. Bad because it's like how your title is guidance counselor. That wasn't much guidance there.
Right.
So I ended up getting a temp job at LA Gear, filing papers, and I figured since I'm here, let me try to get a job. And luckily they had these suggestion boxes in every department. This was in 89, 88, so the pre-internet. So if you want to talk to somebody, if you want to send someone an email today, you would actually physically walk it over to their desk, or put it in an inner office envelope, and they'll mail it across the building. But they had these suggestion boxes, and they were just looking for ways to make the company better, and I would put sketches in the suggestion box. I figured I could make the company better if they let me design shoes.
Got some tenacity, man. That is fantastic. Yeah. I mean, and that is that's got to be one of the big secrets to your success. We'll probably give away one of the questions later, but I mean, within your career, you've been a head designer, brand manager, director of design. You've had a lot of opportunity to see what works and what doesn't work in the process. What are some things that you've learned along the way, and design challenges that you've overcome, or lessons you've learned from those things?
I would say probably one of the bigger ones is communication. And the reason why I say that is because designers aren't really taught the importance of verbal communication. I mean, they're taught visual communication because that's what we do. We create with our hands. But the verbal aspect of it is just as important. And largely is because you're basically trying to, convince someone that what you created is their idea, especially in corporate. So there's a lot of psychology involved. But it's that art of being able to communicate what you've created, so they don't look down on you. So, designers are sometimes looked upon as, you just create, you just draw.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you break down what we do in its simplest form, yeah, maybe, but can you do it? Now, so I think that we get a bad rap, sometimes where because of what we do, we make it look easy because we're drawing pictures in their mind. But being able to communicate and being respected for the fact that you actually have a voice and you can properly talk about what you've created and explain what you've done, that's probably been the number one, and that actually separates people from getting jobs too. I mean, because you could be the most talented person in the world, but if you can't communicate,
Right.
You're not going to get a job.
Yeah, right. Now, with over 20 years in the footwear industry, you have got to have a favorite shoe you've designed and a favorite shoe you didn't design. What are those?
Favorite shoe, it would probably be the new Retro 2. And I would say probably more sentimental than favorite, mainly because it was so when I was in high school, I was designing Jordans when I was in high school, and the last shoe I designed was the Air Jordan 2. I did my version of it, and my first basketball project when I got to Jordan 12 years later was to redesign the Air Jordan 2. So it was something that came kind of full circle 12 years later, and then the other one is probably the shoe I wish I would have designed is the Air Jordan 3. That was the one that, I had 1 and 2 when I was in high school, but the 3 was the one that I think I really fell in love with the brand at that point in '89. And it's still to this day, it's just one of those classics because it was simple then and it's still simple now. It's just a classic.
I mean, you started Pensole Footwear Design Academy. What prompted that, and what aspects of footwear design are you trying to teach people?
A couple things prompted it. One, from my childhood, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to school to design footwear, but there were no schools that taught it. So, you fast forward 20-something years later, 25 years later, there's still no school that you can go to that, specializes in designing footwear. So, at least in the U.S. So this is the first one in the U.S. that's focused on specifically footwear design. But what's interesting, though, is, it's more product design. So I'm teaching you the principles that you need for product design. I'm just using footwear as that product. So the things that you learn, you can apply to any object or any product. It's just that, you've selected footwear as the interest that you want to go into. So it's more of a design school specifically around product design with just the lens of footwear. But in the school, man, it's not just about design. Like I mentioned a little earlier about the communication part. I mean, you learn how it is to work in corporate America. So my philosophy is learn by doing, because you learn quicker, you retain longer, and you're more genuinely interested in it if you're learning something and you're doing it at the same time, where there's some direct implications of what's going to happen based off of your efforts. So I teach you basically exactly the way you work in corporate America. So the projects are real. Some of them do go to market. But most importantly, it's exactly what you would do and have to do in corporate America, from 12 to 15-hour days to starting over halfway through the process towards the end of the process. It's the real experience of what happens.
Yes. So really, though, has shoe design changed a lot over the years? And how does technology like the CAD and the 3D printing play into all this?
It has changed, but then again, it hasn't. Footwear is, an old school craft. It's still, it was birthed by hand. And I think that's the part that's being lost with the CAD. I think CAD obviously helps. It makes things easier and quicker. But I think from a designer's point of view, it makes you lazier in some cases as well, because you actually really never learn the craft of how to do it by hand. If you learn the craft first, then it's way easier to do it in 3D and using CAD programs. And plus you have a more genuine understanding of what you're actually doing in 3D beyond just trying to make it look cute.
Right.
So for me, I would say it hasn't changed much, but on the other hand, it has changed in the way of just the shortcuts it takes to get to the end result, which aren't always good at the end.
So what advice would you have for anybody who's interested in footwear design and getting into that industry?
Come see me. I mean, if you're serious about it, that's what I'm trying to build. I'm trying to build a place where people get jobs as well. I have over 23 students that are now currently working professionally in 2 years.
Wow. a lot of people in the product design world are really right now kind of jaded about the design education market in America. That industrial design students coming out of school don't know what they're doing, so they say. So the line goes, and they're really underprepared for the real world. Why is that? And how do you think that the education establishment could do a better job serving its students?
I think it's the other way around. I think that the corporate side should do a better job of serving the education side. I think the students are not as quite prepared as because maybe some of the instructors haven't really worked a long period of time in corporate. So if you have more corporate designers or professional designers go back and teach them the realities of what it's like to work at certain places, then they'll be better prepared. Instead of the theory of design or the theory of what it's like to be in that job interview or to work with people from different countries and different races. But yeah, I mean, that's the flaw I see. I mean, in my old job, I would see over 400 portfolios every year. And, the portfolio is just one part of it. I mean, there's multiple stages to getting a job. And even that one part, they're still flawed.
Right.
And once we bring them in, whether they're interns or for me now, it's having students that are graduate students from some of the top design schools around the world. And it's like those basic fundamental skills of communication, working with others, that it's not about you from a design point of view. You'll be lucky. I mean, you'll be crazy lucky if you ever design something for yourself. The majority of the time you're going to design for somebody else or something else. And it's like, you have to understand that, well, you have to release whatever ego you have or whatever personal judgments you have and really dive into what you're creating. And it doesn't seem like school teaches you that on some levels. But what the biggest thing I've seen is I think more corporate or professional designers should go back and teach to help better prepare them for the real world because they live it. And corporate is different than education. I'm finding that out of being in corporate for the last 22 years and now flipping over to the education side. It's
Right,
completely
right.
different.
It's a different
man.
animal.
It is completely different. Politics are consistent, but it's still it's different.
Absolutely. Well, as a colleague who's done both corporate and teaching, I can agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Dwayne Edwards, having you on the show has been even better than that time Josh set out on a pogo stick journey across the entire United States and quit after a mere 10 feet. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Cool, man. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys inviting me on and tell Simon I said thank you. I look forward to listening to the show and I wish you guys a lot of success with it too.
If you would like to send pogo sticks, Air Jordans, or super high-tech running socks to EvD HQ, please address them to Josh.
And if you would like to send stinky used high-tech running socks to EvD HQ, please address those to Josh as well. Engineer vs. Designer appreciates your comments. If you listen to the show and wish somebody would flog us to death with shoelaces, head over to engineerversusdesigner.com and flog away.
Yes, and if you want to see us run ultra marathons on a treadmill until we puke into the Gatorade pitchers, be sure to like us, +1 us, tweet us, or whatever else as social media has, in fact, been correlated to getting nowhere fast and feeling sick about
This show was edited by Simon Martin. Our theme music is by Ross
We'll see you
Hartman.
next week, and remember, without engineers, designers would be wearing fancy origami slippers.
And without designers, engineers would be wearing cinder block slippers.
Hey, you penguin.